Okay, so tonight we are talking about collaboration. This is kind of in the spirit of our creativity seminars. If you remember back in October, we did the Twyla Tharp, the creative habit, and talked about all kinds of different ways to kind of get your creative juices flowing. One of the things that really gets me fired up creatively is collaboration. So I thought, a lot of people ask me, well, how do you get involved in these collaboration projects, and how do you go about them, and how do you bring people together? And so I thought it'd be really cool to do a session and bring some guests in to talk about how to do all those things, how to collaborate and how to bring people together. So I'm really happy to introduce my two guests tonight, who are colleagues and friends and who both I've collaborated with. This is Deb Snyder and this is Paul Ocampo. So Deb works in all kinds of fabric arts of all different kinds, and she can tell you a little bit about that. And Paul is one of our wonderful dancers and choreographers at SUU. So my background collaborating with them, we've actually worked together on several different projects, and one of the things we were just saying is the usual suspects. We end up on panels together, and we end up in meetings together, and creative task forces and all that, that creative people tend to find each other that way. Both of them have been guests on my Satellite Salon series, which is twice a year and does all kinds of different art, visual performing, all different kinds of art collaborations. And so they've both been guests for that. So we've all had a chance to work together, and I think they've also worked together independently as well. So maybe, Deb, if you wouldn't mind just kind of telling us a little bit about yourself and your background in collaboration.
Well, I think the place that I would like to start, Lynn, is to talk about the differences between performing artists and visual and literary artists, because I think there's a really important distinction. And that is that usually visual and literary artists are solitary.
Oh, right.
And we work in our little private studios or garrets, and the assumption is with performing artists in dance, music, theater that collaboration comes naturally and is a required part of what you do. So to get the visual and literary artists into the same realm of collaboration with performers, I think, is a very important thing, because we need to get out more, essentially, from our studios.
That's true. When I've worked with painters, they say the same thing. They say, it's so unusual to be with all these people. Usually I'm just alone in my room. And so that is a really interesting distinction.
Well, and I have to say, the first time that I was even awakened to the fact that there could be collaboration, I was an undergraduate student. I took a class in integrated arts, which just absolutely opened my world to think beyond my natural place in visual arts, because from the age of 4, I was singing and dancing and being in plays and doing basically all of the arts. But somebody officialized it by making it a class that, once you have a sensitivity or a passion in one art form, normally you're going to love all of the other arts. And my terminal degree, which is an MFA in interdisciplinary arts, required me then to put together various things in my study plan for that Master of Fine Arts degree.
I didn't realize that your MFA was in interdisciplinary arts, and that's actually a great thing for people to realize. I think sometimes performing artists don't even realize that kind of degree exists, and that might be a great breeding ground for finding collaborators. So.
Absolutely.
Paul, how about you?
I just want to expound what Deb mentioned about the nature of collaboration. You see, as a dancer, we're really exposed to the nature of collaboration. We're the moving body,
right? And
then we collaborate with the costume designer, with the lighting designer. They need to illuminate us, or if it's a modern piece, we sometimes collaborate with a composer or a musician if it's a live music. So the nature of our art is really geared towards collaboration. And one thing I tried or experimented in the past was open another avenue in what did you say, the literary arts. It's solitary. So I brought that into my discipline. So by that, and what I mean to say was I brought a poet in my piece and let them speak the poetry as we're dancing. So it's another element. And I'll talk
Was
more
that
about.
Bob Durborough who did that?
Yes,
Oh.
the one is Bob Durborough, and of the recent past, I collaborated with Dr. Danielle Dubrasky, an English professor in SEU, and she composed wrote this poetry, Spirits of Takasago. Spirits of Takasago. It's based on the Japanese haiku.
Oh.
Yeah. So
And Danielle is a frequent collaborator.
Yes,
In
yes.
fact, her poetry students wrote poems about the art quilts in the show that I
right.
curated last fall, and they have gone on now to write poems about the Jimmy Jones work that has just closed in the Great Lake Gallery. So
Oh, right.
she's another usual suspect. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. There are people that just become magnetized, I think, to each other
Yeah.
because we know that we have that collaborative spirit.
Right. Well, let's talk just briefly about, for people watching, some maybe historical collaborations or things that have inspired you historically for this. I'm thinking, like, in terms of dance, we talk a lot about the Diaghilev Ballet Russe collaborations with Coco Chanel and Stravinsky and all these different, and Fokine, and all these different people, and how that was we as modern collaborators can look to those works and kind of get some ideas, and maybe if there's one or two others, and I don't know, in your background, if there's any historical people that kind of inspired you that way, or things that people that are watching could maybe dig into and look at for motivation and inspiration. It's maybe more difficult in your area. We'll start with
I think
Paul.
it is. Let's start with Paul.
So I mentioned the Ballet Russe and Diaghilev.
Yeah.
I mean, for musicians, we think of that as a great collaboration. So for those listening, I would really encourage you to look up. There's some great books written about it. Lynn Garofalo, I think, is one of the authors. There's some great books written about that collaboration. And what that guy, Diaghilev, who was the impresario of the Ballet Russe, had this knack for bringing these usual suspects that we've mentioned around, and he found composers like Stravinsky and great famous dancers of the time, and even designers like Picasso and Chanel, and got them all together, all somehow working together. So that's one that people can kind of research. Are there any others that have maybe had an impact on you? And if there's not, that's okay. I was just curious.
I'm really was really inspired by the collaboration of back home in the Philippines, where my motherland is. The collaboration between architect and a choreographer. The architect designed the sets. Usually they will be designing
Buildings,
and
yeah.
but this one is really designing a set for a choreographer. And also Martha Graham collaborated with a famous Japanese architect residing in New York, Ichasumun. It'll come back. It was Samu Noguchi, I think so. Anyway, that really precipitated me to collaborate with an artist from a different discipline. It started back in Singapore while I was a dancer with Singapore Dance Theatre. I collaborated with an architect, and I asked him to design a set, or essentially a background, a tableau.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was he was painting behind the. It's kind of about 15 by 15 white cloth. You don't see the artist, but what you see are the black ink, just really. So the image is
Appearing.
keep on
Wow.
appearing. And so he's in the dark, and then she dances, and then I said, that's a beautiful thing, because it's really a movement that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
More than the image, it's really the movement of the brush stroke. And so I furthered that with, I said, okay, why not try another art form, a literary art form. So, and that precipitated my collaboration with Danielle Dubrasky And then very recently, can I begin? I collaborated with Deb and a painter. So I said, okay, how am I gonna do this? How can I make this come to a fruition? And so with Deb's expertise, he guided me and he contributed, and more importantly, he really guided me in the process of how can we achieve this, how can we achieve our goal, our objective, to make a wholesome, a really substantial art form.